jihad, it's one of the very funny issues, has been widely misinterpreted. Before I start, I want to ask you a question. Like, you know, in here or in Europe, if somebody is practicing jihad, is usually referred to as a jihadist, right? It's a word that is a mixture of Arabic and English, but people who practice jihad are referred to as a jihadist. And I want to ask you a question now. Would you like to be called a jihadist? Don't answer me now. Just answer in your heart. And when I finish my talk, I'll be asking you the same question. And I won't want the answer. I also want you to leave this room with the answer in your heart without sharing that with me, you see. But I'm doing this because I want to show you to what extent these terms have been misinterpreted. Misinterpretations of terms does not help coexistence, because people who have studied these terms, Muslims basically, they would stand up to defend these terms based on their understanding of these terms. However, when these terms are distorted, then these terms are attacked in a way that are not justified, and that creates a rift between Muslims on one side and non-Muslims on the other side. And who is contributing to this misunderstanding? Well, some Muslims, yes, and some non-Muslims definitely yes as well. Media people have played a fundamental role in creating misconceptions about these terms, you see. And today I will prove to you that this theory is correct. So if we start here with this question, what does jihad mean? Don't tell me, tell yourself. What does jihad mean? And I give you 3 seconds to think of it. Your time is over. How do we Muslims understand the word jihad? My computer is going to tell you everything about it. So the jihad, a derivative from jahada, i.e. to strive, refers to exertions of one's power for a good purpose. That is the meaning of jihad. So me, coming from Dublin to Limerick today, I am exercising jihad. You going to your classroom to learn something, you are practicing jihad. But it has to be for a good purpose. And here comes the agreement and the disagreement, because what you may classify as a jihad, I may classify as a non-jihad. Because what you may see as something good, I may see as something bad. And that is very critical for the theory of coexistence. Let's say, for argument's sake, if somebody breaks into the door right now, and he comes in with a sword, and before killing us, he says, I am Jesus Christ. And he starts killing this side first. And then he looks at the people on that side, and he asks you, who am I? Will you call him Jesus Christ? No, you are not. If you call him Jesus Christ, then you're giving him justification for what he is doing. You're encouraging others to follow him because people love Jesus Christ. The point is, if you claim that what you're doing is jihad, and if it is, and I don't see it as jihad, I should not call it as jihad. If you call yourself an Islamic State, and Muslim scholars stand up to say you are not an Islamic State, then you, as non-Muslims, should not call them an Islamic State, because they are not an Islamic State. This is what the Muslim scholars are saying about them. The person who practices jihad is referred to in English as a jihadist, but the Muslims have a term for that. He's called a mujahid. There are a number of Muslims who are called mujahid. But the person who had the characteristic of jihad is called a mujahid. If he is exerting his best to achieve something good, then he is a mujahid. Do you see the point? The circle of jihad encompasses everything that I do and everything that I shun in my life. If you go outside this place and tell people I am practicing jihad, what will happen to you? But do people really understand what I mean when I say jihad? You find yourself in a dilemma, in a catch-22, when you are sharing a panel with other speakers and we all are defending peace, and then you'll be surprised with some of the panelists who will be throwing these terms in a negative way. Now what are you going to do? Argue with them, clarify for them, or overlook what they have done? The point is, the bottom line is education. Education. The people have fear, and usually this fear is founded on false premises. I need to understand what you're talking about. And that's the bottom line. Who is creating this fear? Of course, the people who are creating this fear are the people who take advantage of our fear. And the people who take advantage of our fear are not limited to a particular race or a particular faith. But some people will be doing that for commercial purposes. The people who manufacture weapons, they want to sell their weapons. And if they don't create a fight here or there, then the business will be hit with a severe recession. And they don't want that. They don't want that. The media people, good news is not good news. But hot news are hot news for them. So they will be using these terms and distorting these terms. So the Muslims will stand up and defend these terms. And these terms have been used and abused by Muslims who are not in this place. And then you'll be seeing Muslims standing up who will be fighting and arguing as well. But the bottom line is education. The circle of jihad is as broad as you can see in the definition. And how do we understand, how do we come up with this conclusion about this term? Well, if it is anything about Islam or about an Islamic term, for me to understand it, I need to go back to Islamic resources. And these Islamic resources are the Quran, the Sunnah, the Ijma' and the Qiyas. The Quran, that's the book that Muslims call the Word of God. The Sunnah is what is narrated about the Prophet Muhammad's action or speech or approval or disapproval. And the Ijma' is the consensus of the Muslim scholars. And the Qiyas is analogy. But if I'm talking about a term and I want to understand that term, I need to refer to the Quran and see how the Quran is applying this term, and that will be the understanding of the term. Now, where does the word jihad appear in the Quran, and in what context? You'll be surprised, because the verse I am quoting on my screen right now is talking about something completely different. I might ask this lady to read the screen for us. Can you read it? Well, let me read it to you the way Muslims would read that. It reads, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. ووصينا الإنسان بوالديه حملته أمه وهنا على وهن وفصاله في عامين أن اشكر لي ولوالديك إلي المصير. I know you don't understand that, but I read it aloud because I know this is more powerful than what I say to you in English. What does it mean? Here it is. And we have enjoined on man to be good to his parents, and travail upon travail that his mother bears him. And in years twain was his waning. Hear the command, show gratitude to me and to thy parents, to me in thy final good. You find this in Surah number 31 and verse number 14. Still the word jihad has not appeared. They got the verse from the beginning. You see the word in red. It's not in red anymore. Oh, it is. But it reads, وَإِن جَاهَدَاكَ عَلَىٰ أَن تُشْرِكَ بِي مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٌ فَلَا تُطِعْهُمَا وَصَاحِبْهُمَا فِي الدُّنْيَا مَعْرُوفًا وَاتَّبِعْ سَبِيلَ مَنْ أَنَابَ إِلَيَّ ثُمَّ إِلَيَّ مَرْجِعُكُمْ فَأُنَبِّئُكُم بِمَا كُنتُمْ تَعْمَلُونَ. And what does this mean? Here the word jihad appearing in red again. But if they strive to make thee join in worship with me things of which thou hast no knowledge, obey them not, yet bear them company in this life with justice and consideration, and follow the way of those who turn to me in love. In the end, the return of you all is to me, and I will tell you the truth and meaning of all that ye did. And that's the number of the surah and the chapter. The point is, the term jihad is appearing here, and it has nothing to do with fighting. It is actually the way things are happening at home. So somebody is exerting efforts to do something. So it is not related to fighting at all. Not related to fighting at all. But it reminds us of how Islam commands children to be grateful and show gratitude and the way they treat their parents. That's where you find in the Quran. Then where can I find this in the Sunnah, i.e. a hadith, a narration about the Prophet Muhammad? A man came to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, asking for his permission to go out for jihad. And here, jihad means to go and fight. And what did the Prophet say to him? The Prophet asked, "Are your parents alive?" He replied, "Yes." The Prophet said, "Then your jihad would be with them," i.e. looking after them and being at their service. Well then, looking after my parents is jihad. Helping my parents is jihad. Have we ever heard that before? This is not me saying that. This is what the Prophet Muhammad is saying. That nobody can dispute that. Well, what is the Islamic rule regarding jihad? This verse tells us. It says, وَجَاهِدُوا فِي اللَّهِ حَقَّ جِهَادِهِ. Strive in the way of Allah in due manner. That is to say, jihad is an Islamic obligation. Is there a problem with that? No. The problem is how you understand jihad. The problem is how you practice jihad. Here is the problem. So when we stand up and start fighting and criticizing jihad, what are we doing? We're antagonizing the Muslim nation. But actually, what we should be doing when somebody misbehaves, that we don't call what this person is doing as jihad, but call things in the real name. If it's a crime, call it a crime. If it's a murder, call it a murder. Call the culprits in the real name. If it is Ahmad, then Ahmad. If it is Tom, then it is Tom. If it is John, then it is John. Why do you call him Muslim? Why do you call him Muslim? Call the culprits in the real name. And call the crime in its real name as well. Well, when America invaded Iraq, did they call it invasion? It was not called invasion. If it was called invasion, do you think the American soldiers would go and fight? No. We're fighting for justice, guys. We're going over there to remove a dictator. We're fighting over there to help the people have their freedom. So we have a good cause. So if you call the crime a crime, it will make a difference. What are the categories of jihad then? Well, you've seen how broad the circle is, but I'm trying to narrow it down to help you understand it more. The first jihad is the jihad of the heart, in here. And what is the heart? My heart is the vessel that harbors all my feelings and all my ideas. It's in the head of your body. Your heart gives orders to all other organs, starting with the tongue and then the hands and the legs. So everything comes from the heart. And if I have a good heart, I will have a good person. But if I have an evil heart, so I'm having an evil person. The desires, the plans, everything emanates from the heart. But then I need to have jihad or declare jihad of the heart first, and that's my first step. And how can I reach success in this jihad? It needs knowledge. It needs knowledge. If you understand what is written in here, it says يَعْلَمُ خَائِنَةَ الْأَعْيُنِ وَمَا تُخْفِي الصُّدُورِ. It is talking about God. It is talking about Allah. Allah knows everything. Allah knows what's in your heart right now and what is in my heart. Allah does not need you to speak, so He knows what you are planning to do, but He knows everything in the heart. Well, once I know that Allah knows the tricks that deceives with the eyes and that the hearts of men conceal, but then I need to start with my heart. I need to start practicing this jihad first in my heart. The jihad of the heart requires knowledge. God is the owner of everything, and we're just trustees. The people, and this is just one example actually of all the characteristics that you may think of afterwards. The people, if they're asked to give for charity, or if they're asked to help, what do you need? How do you motivate them first? You talk to their hearts. You talk to their hearts. And that puts me back to the fourth pillar in Islam. It's fasting during the month of Ramadan. It's the 9th month of the Muslim calendar, and during that month, Muslims refrain from all foods and drinks from dawn until sunset. They get thirsty. They get hungry. But do you think God wants me to be thirsty? Do you think God wants me to be hungry? Well, in fact, God has set certain laws in this universe. And this is what we call in today's time the law of cause and effect. You have to follow the right course to reach the conclusion or the projected conclusion. That when people feel thirsty and feel hungry, the whole idea is to create and maintain inside them a more charitable character. You've had the experience of being hungry. You've had the experience of being thirsty. And now you hear about people who are hungry and people who are thirsty. What are you going to do? When you hear about the Syrians who have been forced to leave their home, and this is happening within the hearing and the sight of the entire world. You see children and women and men, houses knocked over their heads, they're buried under the buildings. What are we doing? What are we doing about that? you need to have jihad in your heart. At least in my heart, I condemn what is happening over there. What is happening in Syria in today's time is a stigma on the forehead of our century. It has put all the values of the West at the acid. We are tested with regard to our values. This is happening within the hearing and the sight of the United Nations. Who's doing what about it? Do people really care about others? Where's your heart? But we need to have jihad of the heart so we become better people from inside. When I see somebody suffering, I need to feel my heart is squeezing. I need to feel my heart is bleeding. And if this is not happening, there is something wrong with me. There's something wrong with me that I need to treat. But here it is. This is the jihad. Jihad of the heart requires knowledge. Do you see this verse? It is one of the most powerful verses in the Quran that I have read. It says, وَلْيَعْفُوا وَلْيَصْفَحُوا أَلَا تُحِبُّونَ أَن يَغْفِرَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ. A story that we read in the Islamic literature about one of the companions of the Prophet Muhammad. His name was Abu Bakr. The Prophet was married to his daughter Aisha. And then Abu Bakr is a very famous character in the Muslim history. Every Muslim knows this name. And then Aisha, the Prophet's wife, was afflicted. She was tested at the highest level of affliction. And what was that? Somebody created a story and spread rumors about her behavior. Aisha at the time was unwell. The Prophet heard the rumors and did not say a word to her about it until she got recovered, and then after that she heard what was said about her behavior. So she went back to her father's house, and then the Prophet came runningly to the house and told her that God has revealed the Quran from the heaven to prove that you're a chaste woman. Well, Quran is coming down for the sake of one woman, yes. And that's the position of women in Islam. The people always accuse Muslims of treating women as second-class citizens. But have they ever mentioned that in the Islamic literature, it is recorded that the angel Gabriel came down from the heaven to the earth, carrying certain verses from the Quran, and gave them to the Prophet Muhammad to prove and show that Aisha was a chaste woman. For the sake of one woman, God revealed Quran and commissioned one of his angels to come down to the earth. And this is written in the Muslim Holy Book. These verses Muslims recite until today's time. Well, when Abu Bakr heard that, then Abu Bakr said, well, this man that I give charity, I'm not going to give him charity anymore. He was poor, and he lived on the charity given to him by Abu Bakr. But then Allah revealed Quran again. And in the Quran, وَلْيَعْفُوا وَلْيَصْفَحُوا, let them forgive. أَلَا تُحِبُّونَ أَن يَغْفِرَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ. Do you not like that Allah will forgive you? If you want God to forgive you, then you have to forgive me. What did Abu Bakr do? Abu Bakr went back straight away and gave him charity again, despite the difficulty he imposed on the Muslims in that time, despite the difficult situation he put the Prophet's wife in, despite the difficult position he put Abu Bakr's daughter in, and Abu Bakr forgave him, but we need knowledge. There is another type of jihad. It is called jihad of the tongue. Yes. The heart is the vessel where I harbor all my ideas. and I start expressing them using my tongue first, and then the other organs will act. You see, here is what the Quran says, and this is what everybody needs. Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu kunu qawwamina bil qist shuhada lillahi walau ala anfusikum aw al walidain wal aqrabin. Can you be just even if it's against your parents? But this is what Islam says. O you who believe, stand out firmly for justice as witnesses to Allah, even as against yourselves, or your parents, or your kin. This is what the Quran says. This is what the Quran teaches Muslims. And you hear somebody is looking for a level of fame. They take the Quran to a place and then they start misbehaving with the book. How do the Muslims feel about that? And then when the Muslims act or react, then they're called terrorists. Well, it's all a matter of education. I'll skip this screen just for your time, you see, because I know that's what you are interested in, the jihad of sword. Do we have jihad of sword in Islam? We do. And if somebody says no, then they're not talking the truth about Islam. We do have jihad of sword. But is it something good or something bad? I leave this question in your heart and I answer it at the end of my lecture. I have another question here. The Prophet Muhammad is called in the Quran as a mercy that God sends to all that exists. The question is, did the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, practice the jihad of sword? And if he did, why? Did he fight? Well, and if he did, why did he fight? The following will be the answer for all these questions. The Prophet Muhammad said, yes, you can fight, but when? That's the first reason for fighting. Self-protection. Self-protection. Well, it is not only for human beings, but anything that God has created. Try to kill it and see what will happen. There will be resistance. But if you don't try to kill it, everything will be okay. Everything will be okay. See? But if it is self-protection, then yes. And why not? This is actually in the United Nations Convention. The United Nations Convention tells us, yes, we have the right to defend ourselves. Well, I'm glad that I am speaking to you, Irish, in Ireland. You have been occupied for long decades, and you did fight back. Why did you fight back? Because you wanted your freedom. Because you wanted to liberate your land. Was it a good action or a bad action? Well, was it a good action or a bad action that somebody would come and occupy my country, take our land, classify themselves as lords, and we become the slaves for them in our land? And then the people decided to rise against them and fight against them. Was that good or bad? Were they protecting themselves or transgressing the limits? This is a translation of a verse in the Quran, and it reads, to those against whom war is made, permission is given to fight, because they are wronged, and verily Allah most powerful for their aid. What is the story? The Muslims lived in Mecca for a period of 13 years, and throughout all the 13 years they suffered severe persecution. They were not allowed to practice their religion. They were tortured to death. And then the divine command was they should leave Mecca for Medina. Muslims lived in Medina for 13 years. And they were not allowed to practice their religion. They were not allowed, they were denied their primary human rights. They could not live there. And then God did not say to them, fight back. But God said to them, leave the land and move to another land. And they wanted to leave. But the infidels of Mecca, they denied them even that right. You're not allowed to migrate. Well, most of them then migrated secretly. In fact, only one of them who migrated publicly, Umar ibn Khattab, but all of them migrated secretly. The people, or the infidels of Mecca, they went after them and they looted everything that they had on them. And they tried to put them back. The bottom line is, they've taken their houses, they've taken all their belongings, and then these Muslims, they managed to escape and go to Medina. Because of that, they were given permission to fight back. Was that fair or not fair? Well, if people choose to practice certain faith, and then they're denied this faith, and then they did, okay, if you deny me this right, I'll move and live in another land, and then I go move to live in another land, and still you're going after me in the other land. So what's the alternative then? I need to protect myself. But that is the first justification for war in Islam. Self-protection. Self-protection. Protection of the places of worship. Here in the verse, or the translation of the verse, let's see, and I want you to read it. You see? Did not Allah check one set of people by means of another, there would surely have been pulled down monasteries. Is that a place for Muslims? Churches. Is that a place for Muslims? Synagogues. Is that a place for Muslims? And here comes mosques. All the places of worship are to be protected. And if they're not protected, then it is the practice of jihad to go out and defend these places of worship. Well, people always say that, well, non-Muslims are denied the right of practice, religious practice in Muslim countries. Where is this happening? Well, I come from Egypt. And you might be surprised, but before coming to Ireland, I worked as a tour guide. And you know what my job was? I used to take tourists to explain to them St. Catherine Monastery. How old is St. Catherine Monastery? It predates the coming of Muslims to Egypt. Is it still there? It is in the heart of Sinai. It is opposite the mountain where God spoke to the prophet Moses. It's there. It's there, and it is protected. See? Well, what if tomorrow Egypt, for example, say, no, Christians have no right to practice their religion in Egypt. Well, I support this decision. No. Because in the Quran it reads clearly, La ikraha fid din, let there be no compulsion in the religion. What's the whole theory of individual accountability? If you deny me the right to choose my faith and practice that faith. In the time of the Prophet Muhammad, not everybody accepted Islam. Some people died as idol worshippers. Well, the Quran gives people the right to choose their faith and practice their faith, and if they are denied this right, then it is the Muslims' jihad to protect all the places of worship. prevention of war. Yes, it is one of the objectives of jihad, prevention of war. And how that? In the Quran, the Muslims have a clear command to prepare power. And the power they are commanded to prepare is to deter others from attacking them. Here is the reason explained. You build a very powerful army, and the reason for that, we're not saying that you take this army to attack others, but you become powerful so others will not start a war against you. So you're not involved in fighting. So it is one of the main reasons of jihad, the prevention of war. A response to the breach of treaties. Yes, it happened in the time of the Prophet Muhammad when they were in Medina. You see. The Prophet Muhammad, when he migrated to Medina, the Medina was inhabited by people of faith and no faith. And he drafted the first constitution that gave everybody living in the place, regardless of their faith and their race, rights of citizenship. We're talking about citizenship in today's time, but you can refer to the Constitution of Medina and see how it guarantees the rights of Muslims and non-Muslims under the leadership of the Prophet Muhammad. But it happened in the time that it was part of this treaty pact that all the people living in Medina, if Medina was attacked, then everybody had to stand up to defend Medina. And the infidels of Mecca at the time prepared the biggest army at the time. And they went to attack Muslims. The Muslims did not know what to do. So they came up with the idea of digging a trench so the infidels of Mecca would not be able to cross the trench and kill them, because there were so many and nobody would be able to face them. They did dig the trench, but there was a tribe on the other side of Medina. There was no trench over there, but they betrayed the Muslims. And they entered into negotiation with the enemy, so the enemy would go in from that side and kill Muslims. That was a reason for war, because they have, this is what we call in today's time the capital treasury, fighting against aggressors. Yes. And we find this verse in the Quran. If two parties among the believers fall into a quarrel, make ye peace between them. But if one of them transgresses beyond bounds against the other, then fight ye all against one that transgresses until it complies with the command of Allah. Do you see this among the believers? So basically, people always think of jihad when it is a war between Muslims on one side and non-Muslims on the other side. But actually, even among Muslims, there can be jihad. If two Muslim groups fight against each other, then the Muslims are supposed to make peace between them. And if one of them accepts peace, and the other group does not accept peace, then yes, the majority of the Muslims have the right to declare jihad against them. But why are they declaring jihad? They're declaring jihad because they want to stop this aggression. But the two groups of Muslims, yes, still jihad can be declared even if the two groups are Muslims. But do you see the point we're trying to make here? It's the objective of what you are doing will turn it into jihad or a non-jihad. It happened when the Muslims migrated 5 minutes. Right. It happened when the Muslims migrated from Mecca to Medina, and the infidels of Mecca, they looted all the Muslim natural resources. But the Muslims had the right to restore their things back. So what happened? They intercepted or tried to intercept a commercial caravan. And if they managed to take everything from that commercial caravan, that would be part of the infidels of Mecca had stolen from them. Well, that commercial caravan escaped, so they could not intercept it. Despite that, the infidels of Mecca prepared an army and went to fight Muslims. Well, the Muslims had to fight them back. The battle ended. Like the Muslims became victorious in this battle, so it ended in their favor. But yes, that is the reason for the jihad. Well, doing justice to the weak and to the grieved, and that is another saying narrated about the Prophet Muhammad. That is one of the cornerstones that we find about jihad. It says, help your brother, whether he is oppressor or he is oppressed. The companions of the Prophet Muhammad, when they heard him saying that, look what they said to him. They said, O Allah's messenger, it is right to help him if he is oppressed. But how should we help him if he is an oppressor? What does this tell you? It tells me that he must have educated them in the right way. To the extent that if something does not seem right, they will ask about it. They won't just run and do it. And the right instructor is explaining to them, he said, by preventing him from oppressing others. So basically, if a Muslim sees another Muslim oppressing, then it is the duty of this Muslim to stop his oppression. I will finish with the rules. We will not go through all the presentation, but I'll finish with the rules very quickly. We see, even when going to wars, what were the rules that the Prophet Muhammad set for Muslims? Do you see, that's the first rule in Islam. No wish for war. And how that? Here's what the Prophet Muhammad said. He said, do not wish for an encounter with your enemy. Muslims do not look for fighting. The religion of Islam is not looking for fighting with others. We say, pray to Allah to grant you safety, but when you encounter them, then show patience. This saying of the Prophet Muhammad, you find it in Bukhari and Muslim, and these are the two most authentic books about the narrations of the Prophet Muhammad. But you see, the first rule in jihad, no wish for war. The second rule, no transgression. If it involves transgression, then it is not jihad. See what Allah says here in the Quran. They fight in the cause of Allah those who fight you, but do not transgress limits. For Allah loves not transgressors. Even when fighting, there are limits that you cannot exceed. So the cluster bombs, the bombs that we see aeroplane throwing at civilians in this place, in that place, this is how they should be regulated according to Islam. Then where is the terrorism and who is practicing it? The Prophet Muhammad is limiting in the battlefield, even if you have to fight. But Allah says, but fight them not in the sacred mosque unless they fight you. So no fighting should happen in the sacred mosque, i.e. in Mecca. Mecca is not a place for war. If your enemy is there, you're not supposed to fight them. But not only the place, but the Prophet Muhammad also is limiting the time of war. This verse is in the Quran. The prohibited month for the prohibited month. And so for all things prohibited, there is the law of equality. If then anyone transgresses the prohibition against you, transgress ye likewise against them. But fear Allah, I just want to elaborate a bit on this. The Muslim year is made of 12 months. The 4 holy months in Islam are 4. 4 out of 12, Muslims are not supposed to fight in them. Unless somebody is fighting them, then they are responding. But you see, the circle of fighting is being narrowed down, so there is a limit placed for fighting. There is a time limit for fighting. 4 months throughout all the year, they're not allowed to fight. They are only allowed if somebody fights them during the 4 months. And it doesn't stop here. Peace for peace. What does the Quran say? But if they cease, if they stop fighting, then what should you do? Then you have to cease, because Allah is oft forgiving and most merciful. Well, we might give you questions now, because if we go and talk about the ethics of war, it will take us all the time. But I'll let you digest what I have said in 20 seconds, and if you like to talk to the person sitting next to you, but don't declare jihad against me now, guys.
Before, I know people have to leave to go to lectures or whatever, they're on the hour. Do we have questions? Thank you so much, Ali. Because, yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. I was going to say salam alaikum.
Alaikum salam. I'm happy you're saying this to me.
I enjoyed your presentation, and I think it was very purposeful for you to explain it in the context that you did, because I think, as you rightly identified, propaganda in the world now is one of the biggest enemies of the truth.
Yes.
Which is very complicated nowadays. But if I might just say something, I have had the pleasure of working in some Muslim countries for a short while, and no more than living here, I found it quite easy after a while to just come to terms with the way people live and accept one another, and accept their difference, which is equally more important. As a small island country, this is a kind of a new phenomenon for us to be able to accept our brothers from the Muslim world, from the Jewish world, from any world, from any other part of the world, and from all faiths and none. Do you think, therefore, that in this context, that let's say the religious communities sufficiently engage with one another to try and send the common message that there is more in common between them than there is difference between them to the ordinary person?
Well, it is an objective, and a great objective, you see. In order to be successful in delivering this mission, we have to identify the problems in that. See. The first and foremost is that we have people who do not wish that we live together in peace. We have people who have particular interest in creating rift among all people, regardless whether we're talking about Muslims or non-Muslims, you see, but among all people, they don't want people to be in good terms because it does not serve their personal interest. We need to identify these people. You see. The second point is that, yes, we have a problem in Ireland that some unqualified people are given platforms, and they give their ignorance to their audience, and that's a problem. And this problem, unfortunately, is limited for Muslims. The third thing is that we need to stand up against media, because media is not working in favor of the people living in this country. They're only working for their own business, and that's it. You see, religious leaders, they have to work hand in hand together to bring people closer. People by nature are really good. people by nature accept each other. They only start arguing over when something happens somewhere, and this event that is happening somewhere is discussed in a particular way in certain media platforms. You see, it affects. But I have to admit that when the 11th of September occurred in America, actually we were the first people to condemn it. I mean, when I say we, I mean the Islamic Culture Center of Ireland. We were the first people to condemn it. The first letter sent to the Irish president at the time was from the Islamic Culture Center of Ireland. This was how we acted, but also, on the other hand, not only us, but all Muslim organizations, that they received letters from Irish individuals, groups, and organizations supporting Muslims. When Muslims in other parts of the world, they were denied their primary human rights. That was not the case in Ireland, you see. We're living in a wonderful situation, but it's not ideal, you see. We're not hoping to have utopia, but we have to be alerted. Some people, some politicians, for example, they will be using the term immigration and immigrants just for the sake of their publicity, you see. One of the candidates who ran election, you see, just for the sake of publicity and to gain extra vote, what she said was tremendously bad. See, I'm not going to mention her name because I don't want to give her publicity anyway, you see. And thanks God, she got only 200 votes. And that was all that she got. But that shows that the mainstream in Ireland is against what this woman is saying. Let me share with you something that happened to my daughter. My daughter was a Leaving Cert student, and she was coming back from her school wearing her scarf, and that was after the thing that happened in Charlie Hebdo in France. And by the way, that was also condemned and classified as an atrocity. But she was coming back on the bus, and as she was on the bus, one lady in the bus started giving out to her because of her wearing a scarf over her head, right? And well, my daughter came back home and she said the story, and she was not happy because of what the woman said. But let me share the story with you. That woman started giving out to her because of the scarf, and this is what you're doing, you do this, you're bad people, this is what you're doing. And my daughter, no response whatsoever. And then the people in the bus started engaging against that woman and giving back to her whatever she said to my daughter. She used bad language. My daughter did not respond. But the other Irish people in the bus, they gave back to her whatever she said. The bus driver heard the noise, so he stopped the bus on the way and he asked the woman to leave. And she had to leave the bus and get off and took another bus. So what I said to my daughter, now you're not sad because of what happened, are you? She said, I'm sad because of what she said to me. I said, but when you look at the whole picture, that was one person, but everyone else on the bus supported you. So it means that the majority of the people are fine, but just one person is bad. What the people did on the bus was ideal. When something like this happens, it is the responsibility of you and me, for the sake of my children and your children, for the sake of the country that we're living in, that we stand up and let the message of peace, the message of love prevail.
Thank you.
I was most impressed, more than ever, with your explanation of Ramadan and the fasting. And you fast from food and water to be more loving. And we're moving into our Lent, and fasting isn't as popular as it was in my parents' time. You know, we were seeing the fasting as something negative. Now, I had a little experience with some Muslim friends and Catholic friends of sharing Ramadan, practices of Ramadan and Advent. We were into Advent one time. But I feel some of that should be much more among the major churches, that it should become recognised, that it won't become little smaller, little pockets. Do you know that I know change comes from the ground up, and if it becomes too official, it will lose its savour, you know. So I'm only wondering, have you any suggestions or any experiences of young people sharing Ramadan and the Christian beliefs? Because the climate we have in Ireland, there isn't an anti-God, but there is some kind of an anti-church officialdom. But I think it might be a wonderful moment for engaging with a lovely experience there at the Feast of Epiphany, where
Yes.
people united over food.
Yes.
Have you any other practical suggestions where we may meet on common ground and share that wonderful message of Ramadan, that we all become more caring and loving?
Well, I really love what you have just said to me right now. You're fantastic, you see. I have written a book about education in Ireland. And yes, unlike you, I believe, yes, the change comes from that level, you see. In that book, I have suggested that yes, that we have, in the primary school, we have the assembly in the morning, and that assembly is a fantastic opportunity for education and enlightenment for everybody, you see. That assembly, you see, if it is Ramadan, then just get a child from the second class or the third class to tell us about his experience in Ramadan. And when it is a festival, we do the same thing. We're doing this for Christmas and for the celebration and the party. Everybody in the school knows about the Christmas celebration, so that's fine. But also, you would need to enlight other stuff as well and let everybody talk about what they have, you see. It's a very good idea. For us here at the Islamic Culture Centre of Ireland, that we have 2 festivals a year, and during these 2 festivals, we invite everybody. We open the gate widely, and we invite everybody to come and celebrate that. During the month of Ramadan, we have also neighbours activity. So we definitely distribute some Ramadan stuff, like certain food that Muslims will be eating during Ramadan, and share that with the neighbour. We also have Neighbourhood Week, you see, where we invite all the neighbours to walk into our premises. The whole idea of setting up the Islamic Culture Centre of Ireland was to bridge the gap and bring people closer. You see, when you and I come close and see each other, we discover the fact that you are a human being and I am a human being. We both are as much as human beings as each other. But when people are far away from each other, then the problems start, you see. I can see that maybe what we are facing, you see, is not what our children are facing, because these children, my children, they go to a football club, see, they never, like, I went once and watched the match, you see, and I saw my son playing football, calling his football players in the and they call him, pass the ball to me, they'll be fighting over the ball and laughing when they would score a goal. They think in a different way. You see. I think that's what we need to encourage. I think in few years, you see, the perception will be completely different, because these will be the guys who will be in my office and in your office, who will be issuing the driving license and passport. You see, and when you go to a hospital, you see, I think we have become, and especially these young lads, you see, more than us, you see. Like, if I look at the mobile phone of my child and see who is calling and you see, and his classmates and all that, they have a completely different perception, but we need to help them. We need to help them. Like, you see, we as parents, what do we say to our children at home, you see? And it is really enough to have one bad family in the area to contaminate the whole area. And we can see this, and we hear the experience of people living in certain areas where parents, they tend to poison their children's thinking about others. You're not doing your child a favor by advising him to isolate people, certain people, because of their faith or something. No, let the children be children and grow up the way they grow up. When these guys grow up, I think they will have a better world than the world we are living.
Oh, and Nashma.
You gave explanation of the Quran about jihad,
Yes.
and that is peaceful and understandable, and as a Muslim I agree with that. But you never explained how scholars and ijtihad, they interpret jihad. This one thing, one point. The other thing is, you said something about in Egypt, Muslims and Christian and other faiths, they are allowed to practice their faith. And I would respond and say, it's not because of the willingness of the Muslims, it is because of the political machine in Egypt able to protect them and to give them the right to practice their faith. Third thing I want to say about this, the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, the mother organization, we have the other organization in Sudan, which ruled Sudan for 30 years. They killed Sudanese, Christian Sudanese, in the name of jihad. And you know that very well. Would you be able to explain to us what you think about this? About all the points I mentioned, the 3 points, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. See. Well, if you talk about what I have presented here, this is my understanding of Islam in this particular point, jihad, right? If somebody behaves against what I have said, then they are breaking the rules of Islam. They're not acting in favor of Islam. Let me tell you something. If a non-Muslim living in a Muslim country, you know what they're called? They're called Ahlul Zimma. What does Ahlul Zimma mean? A Zimma means the promise of protection given by the Prophet Muhammad. The Prophet Muhammad says that whoever kills a Zimmi, non-Muslim, regardless of his faith, living in a Muslim country, will not find the fragrance of paradise. This is what the Prophet Muhammad says. That whoever kills a Zimmi will not find the fragrance of paradise. This is the punishment they have. And if they are doing something against that, then they are in the wrong context. People are human beings. They have their shortcomings. They fall short from their ideas. And that is not only for them, that is for everybody, even us, even others, you see. If you look at history, you will find that yes, people of various faiths, they carried out massacres against others because of their misunderstanding of religion. And let me give you an example here. I was just researching over the past few days the Inquisitions in Spain when it was called Andalusia. The Muslims lived in Andalusia over there for 850 years almost, you see. Muslims and Christians coexisted in Andalusia, right? But afterwards, you see, when the Muslims were forced out of ruling Andalusia, this is not me saying that, you see. What happened? That whoever, even people who came back as Christians, they were not saved. But what did they do to them? You can see the images online. They sewed them from head to the bottom, like this. You see, and they invented machines. If you see them online, you'll be surprised. But in this Christianity, No. Even if Christians say this is Christianity, I will say no, this is not Christianity. These are criminals. I won't call them Christians, but I call them criminals. They are behaving against the teachings that they read in the book. You see, I don't use them as an argument against Christianity, but I use Christianity as an argument against them. Where is the message of love that you can read in your book? If somebody breaks the rule, right, then I should use his religion against him and not to support him. But again, no human being can be an argument against the religion, because human beings have their shortcomings. Sometimes they behave, sometimes they misbehave, right? But if what they're doing is against what I have said, then what they're doing is wrong. But as for Egypt, I have to admit that, to be honest with you, it is not the political system that is guaranteeing that. I come from Egypt, and I lived half of my life in Egypt and half of my life in Ireland. You see, I had friends in the same area, and they were Christians. And I am Muslim, you see, and when it was Friday, I would be going to the mosque, and if it was Sunday, they'd be going to the church. When it was their festivals, we would go to them to congratulate them. And when it was our festivals, they would come to us to congratulate us. To be honest with you, I would say politicians, when they get involved for the worst and not for the good. You see, if politicians leave people alone, it will be much better than what we are describing in today's time. In Egypt, like, I have seen a lot of mosques and churches facing each other like that. You will hear the Muslim prayer called 5 times a day. If it is Sunday, you will hear the bells ringing, you see. Like, there is, from a religious point of view, there is nothing wrong whatsoever when you give people the choice, freedom of belief and freedom of practice. If you deny them the right to choose their faith, actually you are denying them a right that God has granted them. Then you are doing this as a misbehavior and not as a behavior. Let me tell you, in the Islamic literature, it happened that was in a place, and there was a house owned by a Christian woman, and the number of Muslims increased, so the Muslim ruler wanted to take that house because it was very close to the mosque and turn it into part of the mosque and compensate her. Well, the woman refused to sell her house, so the ruler, what he did, he said, well, it's a matter of public interest, we'll take it. And he took the house and turned it into just to increase the area of the mosque. That woman, she wrote a complaint to the Muslim caliph. And that's the term caliphate that we hear in the media, people are using to scare the Muslims from. The Muslim caliph, what did he do? He sent a very strongly worded message to the Muslim ruler. Knock down this part of the mosque, rebuild her house, and make it better than the situation it was in. And it was done. That's the real understanding of Islam. And not only that, but it happened during the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab, the second Muslim caliph, that there was an argument between the son of the Muslim ruler and the Christian Muslim who lived in Egypt at that time. See, the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab, so a few years after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, so it's not the current political system or the previous one. And the son of the Muslim ruler was stronger than the Coptic man, so he hit him. And the Coptic man, he traveled from Egypt to Medina, where the Muslim Caliphate headquarters was, and he complained to the Muslim Caliph. The Muslim Caliph summoned the Muslim ruler and his son, and he invited Muslims in public. And he said to him, did you hit him? He said, yes, I hit him. So he said to the Coptic man, hit him back as he hit you. And this is the law of justice. And he did hit him back, right? What I found really interesting is not the end of the story, but the middle of the story. The Coptic man covered the distance from Egypt to Medina to complain. It meant he really trusted the justice of this man. And the man was of the level of trust, and he acted in this way. This is what Islam says. If somebody acts in a different way, then they are breaking the Islamic rules.
Okay.
Just on that
Yeah,
particular
sure.
point, if you don't mind, we all came here to find out the danger of jihad, right? I'm no wiser now than I was at the beginning. Because I'd like to know, it's a small group in the middle of Middle East, let's say, creating these problems, right?
Yes.
I'm sure there's maybe billions of Muslims around the world, right?
Yes.
So what are they doing about this dangerous jihad explosion which we're seeing?
Right. Yes. Well, I'll tell you, see, if we're talking about ISIS, for example, yeah. Now, let me say to you that ISIS, they are driving Toyota cars. Are these cars made by Muslims? ISIS maintain themselves by selling oil. Do Muslim countries need oil? So who is helping them? ISIS are fighting with American weapons. How are these American weapons in their hands? How did they reach them? ISIS have so far killed Muslims and only Muslims, right? And they live in a Muslim country. Well then, the danger of ISIS is a danger against Muslims and not non-Muslims. You see, the creation of ISIS is something that puzzled Muslims all over the world. They stood up and called themselves the Islamic State. We as Muslims, scholars, said to them, no, you're not the Islamic State. And Muslim scholars in different parts of the world, they made papers and they published them. You guys missed the qualifications of the Islamic State because of A, B, C, D. They did not respond to these Muslim scholars. But still we heard Western politicians talking about them as the Islamic State. Then who is calling them the Islamic State then? They're not called the Islamic State by Muslims, they're called Islamic State by non-Muslims, you see. And in fact, they live in a Muslim country, they kill Muslims over there, so their danger is against Muslims and not non-Muslims. So we are the people who suffer from them, and not you as a non-Muslim living in Ireland.
I think we could be here all day because I can feel more and more questions. I want to thank Ali for sharing an incredibly complex and rich understanding of jihad as a struggle for good and touching upon a whole range of issues with us: Ramadan, gender, prayer, the jihad of the heart, the jihad of the soul. I mean, fantastic today. And the importance of education. And I'm left with that bus of people in Ireland that I'm very proud of, and the bus driver, when your own daughter was under attack, that had a jihad of the tongue and a jihad that sprung them into action to stop the oppression of somebody. So I want to thank you for leaving us with loads of questions and for giving such a rich presentation today. Thank you.